Hey folks, welcome to S News. Before we get started, do us a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and drop a comment below. That way, you'll never miss any of our videos.
All right, listen up. This is S News, and you're in for a 10-minute ride with me, the old man with a gruff voice. I'll be here the whole way through, so don't go anywhere. We're bringing you real news, no background music, no fancy text. Just the facts and some good, honest talk.
Stay tuned, folks. We've got a distinctive news style, and you'll hear the old man's voice loud and clear throughout. Trust me, you won't want to miss this.
And remember, if you want to support us, subscribing, liking and commenting really helps. Now let's get into it.
Iran's political leadership and the decisions it makes can seem confusing to outsiders.
Yeah. Despite the country's enormous potential to become one of the world's most powerful and prosperous economies, it consistently makes choices that don't seem to benefit its people, its allies, its economy, or even its own leaders.
But these decisions come from institutions and systems that are very different from those in countries most of us are familiar with.
Understanding how these institutions work and where they fit in Iran's leadership structure helps make sense of what's going on, even if it doesn't completely justify the choices being made.
First and foremost, Iran is a religious state.
Its political power and governing authority come from its leaders' ability to interpret God's will, not from representing the will of the people.
This is the opposite of separating religion from politics.
In Iran, Islam is the foundation of its laws, government and economic policies.
But how does this leadership structure actually function in real life?
Who holds power? How are they chosen? And is the system even capable of changing?
So in Islam, especially Shia Islam, there are four main categories of religious scholars.
At the bottom are Taliban or students who spend about 10 to 20 years studying Islamic theology.
Once they finish, they become Hujjat al-Islam, which basically means they're practicing clerics.
These guys give sermons and lead local mosques.
It's not a perfect comparison, but they're kind of like priests.
In Iran, many politicians and senior government officials, like several former presidents, hold this title.
It's almost like a minimum requirement to show that they're qualified to lead according to Islamic teachings.
Above them are the Ayatollahs, senior Shia clerics who are promoted to that rank because of their deep and serious understanding of Islamic teachings.
What sets them apart is their ability to issue fatwas, or religious rulings, that deal with new and complex situations.
Now you might ask, what new religious laws are even left to create after all these centuries?
Well, as technology advances, new issues pop up.
For example, people might seek religious guidance on how to use social media in a way that aligns with Islamic principles.
But it's not always so straightforward.
Just last month, for instance, an Ayatollah issued a fatwa declaring former United States President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to be enemies of God.
Then there's an even higher rank, the Grand Ayatollah, also known as a Marja.
This is the highest religious authority in Shia Islam.
They perform the same roles as Ayatollahs, but on a bigger scale, with more followers and greater influence.
They often mentor those below them in the religious hierarchy. See, here's where the political structure of Iran gets especially interesting. The supreme leader must be a Grand Ayatollah, or at least hold the title of Ayatollah, to be eligible for the role. That's because they need to be able to issue religious rulings, which is a key part of governing the Islamic Republic. Without that rank, the logic goes, a leader wouldn't be knowledgeable enough in Islam to make wise decisions for the country. That's the theory. Anyway.
When Iran's first supreme leader chose his successor, he originally picked Hussein Ali Montazeri, who was basically the only Grand Ayatollah at the time who was Iranian and politically active. Most others were either based outside Iran or simply uninterested in running the country. However, Montazeri ended up opposing some of the restrictions the regime placed on personal freedoms, and so he was removed from consideration.
But since that meant there were no longer any Grand Ayatollahs available to choose from, the Iranian constitution was loosened a bit, now allowing the supreme leader to be either a current Grand Ayatollah or someone expected to eventually become one. This tweak gave the supreme leader the ability to choose a successor who aligned more closely with his vision. Now, if you're confused about the difference between the president and the supreme leader, don't worry, we'll get to that in a bit. The tragic irony of Hussein Ali Montazeri's opposition to the ruling cleric at the time is that the leader he criticized actually died just 3 months later. If Montazeri had waited just a bit longer to speak out, he probably would have become the new supreme leader and could have implemented wider reforms.
As it stands, the succession process has only happened once since the 1979 revolution, from Ayatollah Khomeini to Ayatollah Khamenei. Despite the similar names, the two were not related. When Khamenei became supreme leader, he was quickly elevated to Grand Ayatollah, giving him the authority to issue religious rulings for the Islamic Republic. It's still unclear whether the next supreme leader will already be a Grand Ayatollah when appointed, as the constitution technically requires.
Now, to be fair, the connection between seniority in religious institutions and seniority in government isn't unique to Iran. Historically, many countries, especially those that used to be monarchies, believed their rulers had a divine right to govern. Even today, the Pope is both the head of the Catholic Church and the leader of the Vatican. The King of England is also the head of the Church of England, and Japan's emperor still holds symbolic importance in Shintoism.
Side note, Japan's emperor used to be the official head of Shintoism, but after Japan lost World War II, the Americans worked hard to limit that power to avoid any resurgence of that ideology.
Back to Iran. In today's world, the major difference is that the supreme leader doesn't just hold symbolic power. He has absolute authority. Inside the government, this means he can veto laws, disqualify political candidates, and ultimately has the final say on just about everything. In theory, there are checks and balances, but in practice, those are very limited.
To be fair again, the whole system starts with a public vote. People elect the president and parliament. Women are allowed to vote too, and this right was maintained even after the 1979 revolution. The president handles most of the government's daily operations and appoints ministers to run various departments, kind of like the US president does. Parliament functions similarly to many Western legislative bodies, passing laws and approving budgets.
But here's where the key difference lies. Before anyone can run for president or parliament, they have to pass a vetting process by something called the Guardian Council. This is a small group of 12 people. 6 are clerics appointed directly by the Supreme Leader, and the other 6 are lawyers chosen by the Chief Justice, who again is appointed by the Supreme Leader. So it all loops back to him. In theory, this is supposed to be a system of checks and balances, but since the Supreme Leader picks the people who pick the others, it's really just a way to maintain control. That's also why most top politicians are mid-ranking clerics. The Guardian Council prefers candidates who have shown deep knowledge of Islamic law and spent decades studying religion. A side effect of this is that it takes years, sometimes decades of learning and peer recognition to get to that level, so most political figures in Iran tend to be older. That's not unusual globally these days, but it's still a major factor in how the system runs. So, this setup allows elected leaders and their appointees to handle most of the day-to-day work of running the country, but the Supreme Leader has absolute authority and can override any decision they make at any time. If they push back against him, they can simply be removed. As a result, most officials just go along with his decisions. That said, the Supreme Leader isn't completely untouchable.
Alongside the president and parliament, voters also elect something called the Assembly of Experts. If you think of the Supreme Leader as the CEO of Iran, the Assembly is like a board of directors. They don't do much on a daily basis, but they are the only body that can appoint a new Supreme Leader if the current one dies, resigns, or is removed. So far, that's never happened. In theory, they could do it. But here's the catch. Candidates for the Assembly of Experts also have to be approved by the Guardian Council. There are only 88 seats, and hundreds of people usually apply. In 2016, for example, 801 people registered to run for those 88 seats. But the Guardian Council disqualified all but 166 before the election. The process is extremely murky, but most people are rejected if they aren't recognized as Islamic scholars, if they've shown disloyalty to the regime, or if they've publicly criticized the current Supreme Leader. So yes, people vote for the remaining candidates, but in reality, this group doesn't pose any real challenge to leadership.
Finally, in a refreshingly simple part of the system, the military and state-run media report directly to the Supreme Leader. So do the bonyads, which are kind of like state-owned businesses. They operate like private companies, but they're not profit-driven. They don't pay taxes and aren't subject to normal government oversight. Naturally, this gives them massive power over regular private companies. That's why they control a huge share of Iran's economy. Some estimates say up to 50%.
Finally, thanks for sticking with us and listening to this deep dive. If you want to stay updated, make sure you follow S News and keep an eye out for our next videos. Subscribe, like, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for watching, folks. We appreciate your time, and we hope to see you again